The Catcher in the Rye, a novel by J.D. Salinger, is an absolute literary form of cancer. There is nothing I have ever read in which I have experienced more displeasure. There were moments where I would burst out laughing just because of how fucking awful it was. It was so bad that it was funny. It's missing huge chunks of what it needs to even be a proper story. It's like if Suicide Squad had a lot more unnecessary characters than it already does. All of the characters were unlikable. At random points during the movie, Deadshot would start punching himself in the face with no explanation, and all of the fight scenes, music, and special effects were removed. That would be the equivalent of Catcher in the Rye in terms of dreadfulness.
But why, Tanner? Why do you consider a classic of American literature to be the worst thing that anyone has ever wasted in creating?
Well, I'll tell you. Although many people probably view literature and the art of storytelling a bit differently, I view it like this. There are three main aspects of a well-crafted story: the plot, the characters, and the symbolism, or deeper meaning. The only reason that Catcher exists is for its symbolism, which I consider to be the least important aspect of the three I just mentioned. You can still craft a well-made story without a ton of deeper meaning and symbolism, and Catcher doesn't even get that right. Let's go through them, shall we? First off, the plot. Catcher does not have one. It is literally just Holden wandering New York making a string of increasingly bad decisions. The only time it has anything that resembles a plot is at the end, as if the whole book was just some overly long prologue. And that plot at the end is literally just Holden saying he's gonna leave, and Phoebe saying she's gonna go with him, and him changing his mind and learning to let her innocence go. Oh, how deep, how touching. You'd think, perhaps, that there's some kind of underlying plot? Just off the top of my head, maybe there's a murderer on the loose that kills children, thus tying into the symbolism somehow? Or maybe, I don't know, anything interesting? But no, nothing. Maybe it's a To Kill a Mockingbird style story where the whole book is about the growth and progression of Holden and the other characters? But no, there's no progression. This idiot never learns. It is possible for symbolism to be the plot, but that usually only works if a book is pretty short, or if it's just a short story. This book spends so much time on its symbolism that by the middle you've gotten the point, and it's like beating a dead horse. It's not a hard message to get across. Holden is afraid of growing up and of change, and he wants to protect other people's innocence. That's all it is. And the book spends so much time on that, beating it to death, to the point where you wonder why you should bother continuing to read. There's nothing to keep you coming back, unless you're an English teacher and you crave symbolism like a drug addict who's got the shakes.
Well, Tanner, at least it gets its symbolism right, right? At least not that awful because it has the deeper meaning.
Wrong! It doesn't even matter that the symbolism exists, because something I didn't mention about the categories of storytelling is that they are all interlinked. They facilitate and add to one another. If one of them is rotten, that rot flows over to the other aspects of the story. And since both the plot and characters are rotten, that symbolism is dead as a doornail. All of the symbolism revolves around this one lonely teenager, Holden. But that doesn't fucking matter, because the characters are all so awful that you don't give a shit. I get it, Holden is depressed. But he's such an absolute burden to everyone around him. He believes himself to be suave and even, quote-unquote, sexy. But he's really just an asshole who makes poor lifestyle decisions, as if he's trying to make his situation worse. With the exception of Allie dying, he is the cause of all of his own problems. Guys, he interacts with other humans like a monkey with Down syndrome. He seems to have a superiority complex as well, because he thinks everyone around him is a phony. He hates everything. I'm all for a cynical worldview. In fact, I possess one myself, it's kind of fun. But he takes it to the absolute extreme, to the point where every page of this book depressed the shit out of me. And not in the good way, either. The rest of the cast is a bit better off than Holden, but not by much. There were a few characters that I didn't exactly hate, like Phoebe and that one Carl guy, he wasn't that bad. But everyone else is just kinda awful. And if they're not in the book long enough to matter. They come and go, just there to beat the dead symbolism horse, and then disappear from existence. Now, those are the three aspects of a story, but when it comes to a certain medium, there are specifics to get into. Like, is the book well written? Well, let me ask you this. You know that kid in high school who seems really slow, is a jerk to everyone, disrupts class, sags their pants, thinks they're on top of the world, and doesn't try in school? Well, this book was written by an embodiment of that kid. Old Phoebe. Old Carl Luce. Old Jane. Old Esteban Julio Ricardo Montoya de la Rosa Ramirez. That killed me. It really did. He killed me. He really did. What a goddamn phony. That guy drives me crazy. Goddamn flitty phony. There are ways of making a book sound like it was narrated by a teenager without making it sound like that teenager is a homeless man with no vocabulary or intelligence. No offense to any homeless people out there, I'm sure you're actually much more talented than the person who wrote this book. So yeah, in conclusion, this book may have served some kind of purpose at some point, but now we should really just move on and forget about it. It is nothing but a waste of time and a detriment to literature and society. The book has a right to exist, but I really think that calling it one of the best books ever written is extremely limiting to literature. None of the aspects of a good book are here, except for the ones that are drowned out and made rotten by the shittiness of the rest of the book. If you are considering reading this novel, don't. Do not spend your money and time on this piece of fucking trash. One of the biggest reasons I left Elkin Hills was because I was surrounded by phonies. That's all. They were coming in the goddamn window. For instance, they had this headmaster, Mr. Haas, that was the phoniest bastard I'd ever met in my life. 10 times worse than old Thermer. On Sundays, for instance, old Haas went around shaking hands with everybody's parents when they drove up to school. He'd be charming as hell and all. Except if some boy had little old funny-looking parents. You should have seen the way he did with my roommate's parents. I mean, if a boy's mother was sort of fat or corny-looking or something, and if somebody's father was one of those guys that wear those suits with very big shoulders and corny black and white shoes, then old Haas would just shake hands with them and give them a phony smile, and then he'd go talk for maybe a half an hour with somebody else's parents. I can't stand that stuff. It drives me crazy. It makes me so depressed I go crazy. I hated that goddamn Elkton Hills. There's 277 pages of this shitstorm.
Don't worry, my darling, it's safe now.
And, by the way, if you're one of those people who thinks that my opinion is invalid because I am a teenager, fuck you. It's, people like you that make other people treat teenagers like they're creatures from another fucking planet. So, yeah, go, die in a hole. Toodaloo.